Dementia units have their own culture. They're isolated, they're secure, and they operate differently, completely differently to other places. And when you're working there, it's like you're in a time warp. There's no iPhones, there's no cell phones, there's no computers. And then again, another generation back with memory, because dementia residents have very poor present memory. Some have no present memory, but they may have some past memory. So when they do speak, when they do communicate, it's all about the 1950s, the 1940s. And so you're taken back to that and the values of that, which is very interesting, the time warp of going back to that generation post-World War II, because the values are very different for that generation. And this is one of the reasons that I really enjoyed working with the dementia residents. Discipline is a really big thing for dementia residents of that generation. They worked hard, they thrived, they saved, they educated their family, no credit cards. You know, it was all about if you could afford it, then you'd get it. Many dementia residents didn't get a car until they were 50 years old. Before that, it was the ever-present bicycle, mum, dad, and the kids. So that was one thing. So they were never in debt and didn't have to worry about that, and had the discipline of saving for the car, then they'd get it. Same thing with television. They wouldn't get a television on hire purchase. They'd get the television when they could afford it. And of course, televisions were very expensive in those days. So often it was just one TV for the whole community. So you'd go round to Joe or Bob's place or whatever to see the Queen's coronation or a special rugby match, but you wouldn't have one at home. And then when you did get a television at home, when they did come in, it was restricted viewing, discipline of restricted viewing. And that was often 1 hour a night. So typically in New Zealand with the new TV, 1 hour a night television. All the family gathered around the television. No separate devices in those days, one little black and white as well, television, and then you'd be able to see either Bewitched or, you know, the Flintstones, or maybe Coronation Street if you were lucky. That was on 7 to 7:30, I think. That was it. That was television over for the night. So everything was not regimented, but there was a routine, there was a discipline, there was a focus. Homework had to be done, and, you know, dishes had to be dried, and things needed to be cooked, and everything had to be cooked and peeled, and baking had to be done. You didn't go off to the supermarket to get a whole lot of cakes or bread. Often you'd make your own bread. You'd make everything in the kitchen. So it was a busy place. So night and day you were pretty busy and pretty fit and active because of it, on the bike or cooking or gardening or whatever it was. So how this helps in a dementia unit is that this generation are disciplined, hardworking, good values, family, community coming first. So that discipline in their habits, in their thinking, in their speaking, in their habits, in their work, in their family focus and their community focus, it was all just one big stream of, you know, generous consideration, really. And not just generosity, but making sure that the kids were educated and that they did get good jobs and everyone got a house and no one had debt, and, you know, all solid values and discipline within it. Now, how this helps is because with discipline, with having had such a disciplined life, dementia residents, once understanding how they are able to discipline their thinking, can and do it with enthusiasm. When they realize that they can switch out of their dementia thinking and come across to focused, concentrated, positive thinking, they do it in a flash. They put in so much effort to that because they have the practice, they have the pathways of discipline within their psyche and physiology. So it doesn't take much once they get the gist of being able to switch off from anxiety and negativity of dementia and come across to positive focused thinking, they can do it quite easily, especially when there's a group effort, camaraderie and encouragement. I mean, not quite easily. I mean, they do have to make considerable effort, but because they've got discipline within their character, once they've actually harnessed the ability to do this and they switch into activities, crosswords, puzzles, discussions, they can keep it going really well because they haven't got they're not distracted. As long as there's not a lot of distractions in the unit. But even then, even with the distractions in the unit, incredibly enough, they can keep the focus going, keep the concentration going, because they've had a disciplined life, a disciplined world, and they're used to disciplining their thinking. So now disciplining it in a positive way is just another ongoing framework of what they already have been used to in the past. Positive thinking is quite natural for them. Maybe before it was more a disciplined way of thinking because you had to work hard after the war to get everything up and running. But switching it from disciplined thinking to positive thinking is really not a big leap, because really positive thinking is just switching from negative thinking, and discipline is really switching from laziness. So they understand those concepts. And once they've got that strong, good quality thinking in place, they haven't got the internal distractions of of iPhoning, of scrolling, of wanting to text someone, of wanting to see the latest message, of this, that, the other, that technology's all about. They've got none of that. That's purely their thinking. All their cares are looked after. The dementia unit's running well. They've only really got to focus on what there is at hand for them to be able to bring themselves into a good, positive, present space, which they can and do. And once they've got that in place, they can thrive. And they do thrive in dementia units, because then they can concentrate and think and make friends and be part of a nice little community. And of course, within that, they're fortunate, and they consider themselves to be fortunate, because the staff have to work very hard in dementia units to keep the whole thing going. I mean, it's not always smooth, it's not always easy, and they have to be so capable and so multitasking in a dementia unit. It's not easy work for staff. There can be so many things that happen all at once, let alone the huge load of having to look after 8 dementia residents with all the caring and showering and bed making and then the medications and the dressings and meals and tidy up and serving. On it goes. But then within that, you can have falls, you can have fire alarms, you can have fights break out. All of this happens, and staff have to cater to that within all their other routine. So dementia residents sit back and they sometimes do observe and see how hard the staff are working, and how lucky are they sitting back comfortably in a nice armchair, eating a cake and having a cup of tea, looking at David Attenborough. No other worries in the world. In fact, I did a little survey. I often did surveys with the residents, and mostly with the surveys on happiness for the group, when there was, say, 8-10 in a group, after we'd done the workshop, they were in a good space, they were thinking well, they were communicating, they were happy. I'd ask, okay, so what's your happiness level? 0 is nothing, 0 out of 10 is low happiness or no happiness. 5 is moderate happiness, 10 is high. So how would you grade your happiness? And pretty much when we went through the whole thing, 6 or 7 out of 10 for most of the dementia residents when they were in a good space. Yes, we're mostly happy here. That's it. Most said that most of the time they were happy in a dementia unit because of all these things being in place for them. So it can be done. So Residents' Voice and Residents' Rise, both from a dementia unit, on my website, pietavalentine.com, and Amazon. Thank you for your viewing and likes. Please subscribe.